For listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Diane Kasmerick, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from current issues of the Niagara Gazette on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Here's the lead article from the Niagara Gazette from Tuesday, January 13th. It's titled State of the Parks. Hochul to propose Niagara Falls State Park absorb Devil's Hole and Whirlpool parks. The city of Niagara Falls is home to three of the most scenic state parks in the whole statewide system, lining the Niagara Gorge. Soon, they will all become one large park. One of the proposals during Governor Kathy Hochul's State of the State address calls for combining Niagara Falls, Whirlpool, and Devil's Hole state parks into one park under the Niagara Falls State Park name. The change would extend the park's reach properly along the property along the Niagara Gorge, adding 2 miles of multi-use trails and better connecting it to nearby attractions like the Aquarium of Niagara and the Underground Railroad Heritage System. The governor's office said it would help bring Niagara Falls State Park to reach its full potential, improving the experience of millions of visitors, promoting longer tourism stays in the area, increasing tourism spending, and showcasing the assets and attractions of local communities. As a native of Western New York, no one understands the majesty of Niagara Falls and its economic impact as a world-class tourist destination more than I do, Hochul said. This will benefit not just those who visit, but all Western New York residents by creating a seamless corridor of breathtaking overlooks, historic sites, and world-class hiking opportunities. It is not known yet what can be expected for the Whirlpool and Devil's Hole Park areas or when the changes will be made official. The first New York State Park, established back in 1885, the 400-acre Niagara Falls State Park was the state's most visited park in 2024, drawing more than 9.5 million visitors. Tourists visiting Niagara County in 2024 spent $1.163 billion in the area, with the tourism industry accounting for 22.6% of its workforce. The state park is already home to attractions like the Maid of the Mist boat ride, the Cave of the Winds, the Niagara Scenic Trolley, and the 230-foot observation tower. Some of its more recent additions, the Ralph C. Wilson Welcome Center and the Niagara Region Archive, featuring a host of resources from state parks in Erie and Niagara counties, opened in December 2023 and May 2025, respectively. Whirlpool State Park opened in 1928, covering 109 acres overlooking the bend in the Niagara River, containing the Niagara Whirlpool. The free park reportedly drew in 453,643 visitors in 2024. Devil's Hole first opened in 1924, encompassing 42 acres with picnic areas, hiking trails, and scenic overlooks near Niagara University and the Niagara Power Project. The free park drew in 357,807 visitors in 2024, according to state officials. Other Niagara County state parks, like Fort Niagara, DeVoe Woods, and Art Park, were not mentioned in the proposal. Our next article is also from the January 13th edition of the Niagara Gazette, and this is part of a series called Founders and Guardians. This weekly series, focused on important figures in American democracy, celebrates America's 250th birthday, which is called the semi-quincentennial. This article, Founders and Guardians, Martin Luther King Jr. George Washington was born on Friday, February 22nd, 1732, in Westmoreland County, Virginia. Details regarding his childhood are limited. As a child, he lived at several of the properties owned by his family, one of which was Mount Vernon. His formal education was brief, but he read extensively and engaged in self-directed learning throughout his life. Following his father's death when George was 11, his older half-brother Lawrence assumed a major role in his life. At age 17, Washington became a surveyor in Culpeper County, where he developed an appreciation for the land and the westward development of the American colonies. Okay, let me backtrack here. Although this article is titled Martin Luther King Jr., and there's a large picture of him on the page, this is obviously about George Washington, so I will continue reading about George Washington. In 1752, he began his military career as an officer in the Virginia militia. His service during the French and Indian War provided military experience and an awareness of the changing political climate in the American colonies. George's marriage to Martha Dandridge Custis in 1759 was a loving and supportive union that lasted 41 years. He was an active source of guidance and support for Martha's 2 children. In 1761, the Washingtons inherited Mount Vernon. They managed and improved their 18th century estate, making it their permanent home along the Potomac River. As tensions between Great Britain and the American colonies grew, between 1765 and 1775, Washington, who served in the Virginia House of Burgesses, was a respected voice of reason and calm. In June of 1775, following the April 19, 1775 battles at Lexington and Concord, Congress named Washington Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. From that point through to the end of the war, he maintained an all but constant presence with the Army. During the winter of 1777-78, Washington was the central figure in the transformation of the Army from civilian volunteers to soldiers. Valley Forge is considered by many to be the birthplace of the modern United States Army. Even though the Continental Army suffered more losses than victories, American independence was ultimately secured. Following the signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1783, Washington resigned his commission. He returned to civilian life at Mount Vernon, surrendering all power and authority. The Constitutional Convention opened in Philadelphia in May of 1787, and it ended on September 17, 1787. Washington, a delegate from Virginia, was elected president of that convention. In June of 1788, the Constitution was ratified as the new framework of government for the United States of America. Following his unanimous election by the Electoral College, Washington was inaugurated as the first president of the United States in New York City on April 30, 1789. He was unanimously re-elected in 1792. He remains the only president unanimously elected by the Electoral College. As the first president, Washington breathed life into the executive branch of the new government. He established precedents where none existed. Most notably, he established the President's Cabinet, executive privilege to protect sensitive information, various social and diplomatic roles of the President, the peaceful transfer of power from one president to the next, and the simple title, Mr. President. By refusing a third term, he established an informal limit that continued until the 1940 and 44 re-elections of Franklin Roosevelt to a third and fourth term. In 1951, the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution formalized Washington's two-term limit. Throughout his many years of service, Washington did not blur the lines between his public life and his personal life. As a result, he avoided potential abuses of the powers entrusted to him. He had made himself accessible when his country called on him, and when his service was over, he relinquished all power and returned to the quiet life of a farmer at Mount Vernon. The Roman leader Cincinnatus, who lived between 519 and 430 BC, demonstrated that same model. Because of the similarities in their commitment to service, followed by peaceful surrendering of power, Washington is often referred to as the American Cincinnatus. On December 14, 1799, Washington died of complications from a throat infection. He is buried at Mount Vernon. Although many eulogies were offered, what may well be the most memorable was shared on December 26, 1799 in Philadelphia. It was offered by Henry Lighthorse Harry Lee, a member of Congress who had served with Washington during the Revolutionary War. Lee summed up the enduring relationship between George Washington and his fellow countrypersons when he declared that he was first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. We turn now to the Niagara Gazette from Wednesday, January 14th, and the lead story is titled State Divides. Hochul moves to thread needle with Dems ahead of election challenges. Albany. Ahead of a tough re-election fight, New York Governor Kathy Hochul unveiled an agenda aimed at bridging the divides in the Democratic Party, moving to fight President Donald Trump and capture progressive excitement surrounding Mayor Zoran Mamdani, while also tending to anxiety among moderates about public safety and protests outside synagogues. In most states, governors use their annual State of the State addresses to detail their upcoming legislative plans for the year, boosting their own records while charting a path ahead. For Hochul, however, her speech this year carried additional significance, as the centrist from Buffalo faces challenges from both her political left and right in a heavily contested election cycle. Her own second-in-command, Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, has assailed her for months and launched an unusual primary challenge against his boss, casting Hochul as a reactive executive unable to meet the political moment during Trump's second term. Republican Bruce Blakeman, a Trump-aligned county official in New York City's suburbs, has also announced a run for governor, bashing Hochul over the state's high taxes and cost of living. At the same time, the governor is under mounting pressure from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party to help steward Mamdani's ambitious agenda at the state capitol and raise taxes on the state's richest residents. Hochul appeared aware of the rocky political terrain during her State of the State, announcing a slate of affordable proposals, pledging additional public safety programs, as well as a raft of proposals meant to counter the Republican president's agenda. If there's one thing I know, it's that when New Yorkers move forward with strength and compassion, side by side, there is no challenge we cannot meet, no tyrant we cannot beat, and no future we cannot build, she told a packed crowd at the Egg, a striking domed theater near the state's ornate Capitol building. Child care, a signature priority for Mamdani, was also at the top of Hochul's list, with the governor reiterating plans to set up a child care program for 2-year-olds in New York City, along with a wider plan to establish a universal pre-K program throughout the state by 2028. Mamdani, who was seated near the stage, rose to applaud Hochul's child care plan. The rest of the room followed, delivering her a standing ovation. Amid the clapping, the governor added, "Republicans have kids too, you can stand." Hochul then turned to crime, promising to continue enhanced police patrols on the city's subways and expand the use of mental health teams throughout the transit system. She also proposed a ban on protests within 25 feet of a house of worship, referencing a recent incident outside a synagogue in Queens, where people chanted pro-Hamas remarks, with Hochul saying, "That's not free expression, that's harassment," and targeting a Jewish community in this way is anti-Semitism. Hochul wove heavy criticism for the federal government and Trump into her speech, at one point saying that she would ensure New York's immunization standards are set by trusted medical experts, not conspiracy theorists. The governor debuted 2 proposals centered on the president's immigration crackdown, one that would allow people to sue federal officers when they acted outside the scope of their duties, and another to ensure sensitive locations such as schools, hospitals, and houses of worship can be protected from civil immigration enforcement without a judicial warrant. Public safety will always come first, but it must be pursued lawfully and with humanity, Hochul said. Her plans will be subject to negotiations with the state legislature, which is controlled by Democrats, over the coming months. While Hochul was in Albany, Delgado, who the governor picked to be her number 2 in 2022, was running counter-programming, making stops along what he has called the State of the People tour. This moment demands urgency, honesty, and the courage to act. New Yorkers can't afford Governor Hochul's half measures, he said in a statement. After Hochul's address, Blakeman fired off his own criticism, saying, "If speeches fixed problems, New York would be thriving. Instead, families are struggling and businesses are leaving." Next, we have an article about the reaction of the mayor of Niagara Falls to Kathy Hochul's speech. Governor Kathy Hochul's fifth State of the State address in Albany on Tuesday diverged from its predecessors with more than 200 proposals for legislative action, but few that were targeted for specific regions or communities in the state. Niagara Falls Mayor Robert Restaino, who was in the audience at the state capitol, said he found the address to be a broader vision than usual. "I was kind of waiting for that, but there were not a lot of specifics," he said. "There was no $40 million development or no specific projects for the Adirondacks or central New York or other regions like we're used to." She was painting kind of with broader brushstrokes. Still, Restaino said he was encouraged by the positive impact that Hochul's broad strokes policies could bring to New Yorkers, including folks in the Niagara region. The mayor was particularly supportive of plans to bring universal child care to the state. During the address, Hochul emphasized making life more affordable for New Yorkers. "I think much of that was geared to New York City," the mayor said. "I think it's good she's committing to universal child care." Hochul's pathway to universal child care would begin with fully implementing universal pre-K. She promised that every 4-year-old in the state would have a pre-K seat if they wanted one by the 2028-29 school year. Restaino noted that, dating back to his time as the Niagara Falls School Board president, the local school district has provided universal pre-K. "Our district is already practicing that," the mayor said. Hochul is proposing increasing funding by $1.7 billion to provide care for universal pre-K around the state. Restaino also expressed support for Hochul's technology initiatives, which included new proposals to protect children on social media. The mayor said he was encouraged by the governor's plans to expand the state's microchip manufacturing capabilities. "We are starting to get more interest in AI and chip manufacturing," the mayor said. "It was good to hear she's interested in building advanced manufacturing." Restaino said that while he was in Albany, he had an opportunity to briefly meet with some local state legislators and members of the state legislative leadership. "While I was there, some legislators came over and asked about how we are doing in the falls," the mayor said. "I'm going to make another trip here to have some face-to-face conversations with legislature members." Next, from the opinion page of the January 14th edition, we have an editorial from the CNHI News Service. It's titled "A Year to Get to Know America." The 250th birthday of the United States is a moment for all of us to challenge ourselves to get to know our country again, past and present. Start by reading, if you haven't, or rereading, if you have, the Declaration of Independence. We must never seek to proclaim in fearless tones the great principles of freedom and the rights of man, which are the joint inheritance of the English-speaking world, and which through Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, the habeas corpus, trial by jury, and the English common law find their most famous expression in the American Declaration of Independence, Winston Churchill noted in his Sinews of Peace speech, delivered in Fulton, Missouri on March 5, 1946. Make this a moment to reconnect with Americans of that revolutionary generation by reading about their sacrifice and their values. American Scripture by Pauline Maier is one place to start, or 1776 by David McCullough, or The Histories of That Time by Rick Atkinson. But recognize, too, that the Declaration was the first step of a journey, not the end, and that the truths expressed in its famous second paragraph were not always so self-evident to all. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. This July 4th is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn, noted Frederick Douglass in 1852. Our faith is, this is another quote, our faith is firm and unwavering in the broad principles of human rights proclaimed in 1776, not only as abstract truth, but as cornerstones of a republic. Yet we cannot forget, even in this glad hour, that while all men of every race and clime and condition have been invested with the full rights of citizenship under our hospitable flag, all women still suffer the degradation of disenfranchisement, noted Susan B. Anthony and others in 1876. During a recent visit to the National Archives, where the original Declaration is preserved and displayed, the docent was a woman, and it was two black men who stood guard over it in the rotunda, guiding visitors to and protecting the document laying out the argument for natural rights that earlier generations of Americans did not extend to other Americans. This is a good year, too, to visit those many sites around the country where the history of our 250-year struggle to live up to the high words in the Declaration is on display. Maybe visit the National Archives in Washington, D.C., or Independence Hall in Philadelphia, but if not, then visit sites closer to home that tell the story of that ongoing struggle, including Brown v. Board of Education National Historical Park in Topeka, Kansas, or the Washita Battlefield National Historic Site in Oklahoma. Visit the Trail of Tears in southwest Missouri and northwest Arkansas to understand the journey to full acceptance of Native Americans. This could be a good year to visit the Revolutionary battlefields, from Bunker Hill to Yorktown, as so many visit Civil War sites, or to visit the always inspiring and controversial Mount Rushmore National Memorial in South Dakota. In the speech at Fulton, Churchill warned the United States of two dangers it must negotiate as the world's new great power, its Scylla and Charybdis: war and tyranny. And here's the quote. The United States stands at this time at the pinnacle of world power. It is a solemn moment for the American democracy. For with primacy in power is also joined an awe-inspiring accountability to the future. If you look around you, you must feel not only the sense of duty done, but also you must feel anxiety lest you fall below the level of achievement. This is a good year to deepen our understanding of American history, our triumphs and our failures, to better prepare ourselves to negotiate the challenges ahead. Also from the January 14th edition of the Niagara Gazette, North Tonawanda has a smart growth plan. The New York State Department of State recently announced the completion and adoption of North Tonawanda's new Smart Growth Comprehensive Plan. Smart Growth is a forward-thinking approach to planning and development that supports and integrates four key themes: equity, economy, environment, and energy climate. North Tonawanda's plan will guide future land use, development, and infrastructure decisions based on the principles of smart, sustainable, and equitable growth. The Department of State, the DOS, Smart Growth Community Planning Program provided $100,000 in funding to develop the plan. Here's a quote. The city's commitment to downtown revitalization, brownfield development, affordable housing, and creating accessible public spaces can serve as a model for communities throughout the state, said New York Secretary of State Walter T. Mosley. The Department of State is proud to support the city on so many fronts as it charts and implements a path toward a vibrant and prosperous future. As a follow-up to the comprehensive plan, NT is also currently developing an updated land use zoning code funded through a $135,000 grant from the DOS Smart Growth Community Planning Program, which will help implement the plan by aligning development regulations with the community's vision for the future. Another quote, North Tonawanda's comprehensive plan reflects our community's vision for residents, businesses, and visitors alike, North Tonawanda Mayor Austin Tyler said. It provides a clear roadmap for smart growth made possible through New York State's continued partnership in our city's success. North Tonawanda has received and implemented several other program awards from DOS in the past, including $10 million from the Downtown Revitalization Initiative, $130,000 to update the plan for the city's local waterfront revitalization program, a total of $1.35 million for LWRP implementation projects over the past 13 years, and $423,000 for its Brownfield Opportunity Area Plan for redevelopment of vacant, underutilized areas with known or suspected contamination. The community's vision for the future contained the comprehensive plan states, North Tonawanda is a progressive city with a unique sense of place that is welcoming to all. This plan and the DOS Smart Growth Community Planning Program are funded through the state's Environmental Protection Fund. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Gazette on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We move now to the Niagara Gazette from Thursday, January 15th, front page article, Hotel Live Project Moving Forward. A project turning the former Main Street Howard Johnson Hotel into a combination hotel entertainment venue is moving forward. The developers of the Hotel Live project, 472 Main Street, appeared before the Niagara Falls Planning Board Wednesday night to provide a preview of their plans, after formally filing a site plan proposal with the city last week. The project is described as similar to a Hard Rock hotel, but on a smaller scale. Anthony Pandolf, a civil engineer working on the hotel's design team, told planning board members that most of the existing hotel space will remain intact, but a former two-story swimming pool area will be demolished and replaced with a 4,700 square foot five-story addition that will largely house a restaurant, bar, rooftop patio, and live concert space. The hotel will have 78 rooms, down slightly from the 81 rooms in the former Howard Johnson space. The entire facade of the hotel will also be replaced. We just wanted to introduce the project to you, Pandolf told the planning board members, and answer any questions you might have. He said the formal site plan submitted to the city planning department was in the process of working through departmental reviews. We'll be back in front of you after that formal site plan vote, Pandolf said. The project developer has indicated that construction of the hotel will begin this summer. In December, the project received an extension in cataract grant funding from the Niagara County Industrial Development Agency, the NCIDA. The $450,000 grant from the cataract tourism funding was first approved in August 2024. The funding extension for the rock music-themed hotel and indoor music venue with a celebrity-endorsed restaurant will run through the end of 2027. The project was reportedly delayed because the developers, Live Incorporated, were having difficulty closing on their financing. The cataract funds are a reimbursable grant that can be used only for work on the restaurant and music venue portions of the project. The $16 million Hotel Live was first proposed in June 2024. The developers had promised a hotel experience with each floor themed to a different music genre. It is projected to create 52 new jobs, 32 full-time and 20 part-time. The project funding also includes $2.25 million in tax incentives, $11.65 million in bank funding, $2.4 million in developer equity, and $1.5 million in grants from Empire State Development. The hotel will be the first of its kind in the world. Canadian American Live Incorporated, the developer, also operates the helium balloon ride next to the hotel property, which opened in August 2024. The main editorial on the opinion page of the January 15th edition of the Niagara Gazette is reprinted from the Daily Star of Oneonta. Feds can't be trusted with ICE-killing probe. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. That quote from George Orwell's 1984, written in the 1940s, seems prescient today as the Trump administration tries to tell us we did not see and hear what we saw and heard when an ICE agent killed a Minneapolis woman who was doing nothing worse than driving down the street. Renee Good's blood was not yet cold when Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, her face shaded by a cowboy hat pulled ridiculously over her eyes, rushed to a microphone to proclaim that Good had committed an act of domestic terrorism. Officials still, despite the evidence we have all seen, claim Good tried to run over ICE agents who had created a traffic obstruction on a public street. Video shot by the killer, Jonathan Ross, confirms that Good was carefully trying to navigate the obstacles. She even exchanged friendly words with Ross before he shot her 3 times in the face and punctuated his actions by uttering a profane, sexist remark. DHS released the video, telling us it absolves Ross of blame when, in fact, it does the opposite. "Watch this, as hard as it is," Vice President J.D. Vance tweeted with a link to Ross's video. "Many of you have been told this law enforcement officer wasn't hit by a car, wasn't being harassed, and murdered an innocent woman. The reality is that his life was endangered, and he fired in self-defense." We did watch it. It shows none of those things. Vance and company seem to subscribe to the words of Joseph Goebbels, Nazi Germany's propaganda minister, who said, "A lie told often enough becomes the truth." The disregard of ICE agents for the citizens who employ them was amplified when they refused to allow a doctor to provide aid to Good. Not that it was likely to help. Ross was efficient in his execution. As troubling as the killing was, the rapid movement to freeze state and local authorities out of the investigation. As NPR reported, Minnesota's investigations agency said Thursday that the U.S. Attorney's Office has prevented it from taking part. The investigation would now be led solely by the FBI and the BCA. The BCA would no longer have access to case materials, scene evidence, or investigative interviews necessary to complete a thorough and independent investigation, Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Superintendent Drew Evans said in a statement. It had been decided that the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension would investigate Good's shooting along with the FBI, but that later was changed by the U.S. Attorney's Office, according to Evans. The BCA has reluctantly withdrawn from the investigation, Evans wrote. How convenient. The Trump administration will investigate the actions of the Trump administration. The authorities of the state where the killing occurred don't get to take part. With Noem and Vance having already stated the party line, what reason is there to believe an honest investigation will take place? Most of us were, and are, in favor of the original stated purpose of a step-up in ICE enforcement. We were told they would target gang members and violent criminals. We're all for removing such people from our streets, be they foreign or domestic. But that's not what we got. What we got was a rogue agency of masked gunmen roaming the streets of cities out of favor with the administration and sowing chaos. As they proved last week, criticism of their quest will not be tolerated. Those who oppose them will be beaten, pepper sprayed, and perhaps killed. Protests over the weekend showed clearly what Americans think. Can the party shut all of them down? We'll see. We move now to the edition of the Niagara Gazette from Friday, January 16th, and the lead article is Plowing Through. First heavy snow of the season tests local municipalities. It wasn't a lake effect winter storm that rolled into the Niagara region late last Wednesday night and early Thursday morning, but it was, in the words of the National Weather Service meteorologist John Hitchcock, lake enhanced. It was a low-pressure system coming from the south and east that drew a little from Lake Ontario, Hitchcock said. The result was a storm total of 14 inches in Olcott, largely because of its proximity to the lake. Other totals recorded by the National Weather Service observers include 8 inches in Pendleton. Hitchcock said a reporter's observation of around 7 inches in the Niagara Gazette parking lot on 3rd Street in Niagara Falls was probably pretty close. The first major storm and accumulation of the winter tested the Falls Department of Public Works snow removal response. City plows hit the streets around 11 p.m. Wednesday and were expected to continue plowing through Friday afternoon. Mayor Robert Restaino said a total of 8 pieces of equipment, much of it recently purchased, were on the street as the snow began flying. It's all hands on deck, the mayor said. Plow drivers are following an approach that calls for them to clear main streets, then secondary streets, followed by side streets and alleys. The city has purchased a number of plow-equipped pickup trucks, which are expected to improve the efficiency of clearing the city's alleys. The mayor said the new snow fighting equipment has performed well with few breakdowns or necessary repairs. The challenge has been that there's just no let-up in the snow. That's the problem, the mayor said. Without any breaks in the snowfall, we've had to stay on the mains with the plows because they're filling back up as quickly as we clear them. Restaino said if the snow stops by mid-evening Thursday, the midnight and mornings crew will have a shot at making things better for the morning commute. The mayor also said that residents can help the DPW crews with snow removal by getting parked vehicles off the street overnight if possible. And if you're shoveling snow, try to push it to the side of your property rather than throwing it in the street. That doesn't help snow removal efforts, he said. Niagara County Highway had crews out plowing and salting, addressing the current snow event, Garrett Meal, Niagara County DPW Commissioner, said. With this storm, the snow patterns continue to shift, and we are adjusting our resources accordingly. We have added extra trucks to the routes in more intense areas, he said. Meal also urged caution on county roadways. As with all heavy winter events, drivers should avoid unnecessary travel, give themselves extra time, and utilize winter driving skills, he said. Our snowplow drivers are professionals and are very good at what they do. Please give them the space to get their job done. Our next article, County IDA okays benefits to companies specializing in lighthouse work. The Niagara County Industrial Development Agency approved incentives for 2 companies, one a loan to a new restoration business and sales tax incentives to a vacuum business. The board approved a $175,000 Niagara County Development Corporation loan to Finkel Preservation and Construction, a new Youngstown-based company that specializes in preserving historic lighthouses. Owner Taylor Finkel, formerly of ICC Commonwealth of North Tonawanda, has been involved with preservation and construction projects over the past 20 years, with that firm having worked to restore more than 50 lighthouses, mostly on the Atlantic coast. Loan documents say that as part of Finkel's separation agreement with ICC Commonwealth, he has no restrictions on jobs under $500,000 in revenue for the first year, with any above that going towards ICC. The company will also pay Finkel $50,000 for consultation and training new workers. This new business will potentially create 9 full-time jobs. The board's loan approval had the condition of submitting filings on any equipment purchases. The Sanborn-based National Vacuum Environmental Services Corporation received $93,000 in sales tax incentives toward purchasing a new $1.16 million vacuum truck with sewer and flusher equipment capabilities. The new truck would allow the company to create 4 new jobs, meet customer demands, and bid on more public works. National Vacuum had previously received $93 million in sales tax incentives last June for a new vacuum truck with the same equipment, also costing $1.16 million. And from the opinion page, this is the lead essay, celebrating 3 centuries at Fort Niagara. We're surrounded by history here in the Niagara region. Just last year, we celebrated the bicentennial of the opening of the Erie Canal, complete with a recreation of Governor DeWitt Clinton's historic 1825 journey from Buffalo to New York Harbor, with a 33-day voyage from Buffalo's commercial slip, the western terminus of the Erie Canal, to Pier 26 in New York City. This year, we'll see 2 more big anniversary celebrations, delving even further into our past. As most are well aware, it's the 250th anniversary of America's independence. We'll be getting into that plenty in the weeks and months ahead. Today, we're heading back even farther, 300 years into the past, when the iconic French castle was built on the grounds of Fort Niagara in Youngstown. Built in 1726, the French castle is the oldest building in the entire Great Lakes Basin. As Robert Emerson, executive director of Old Fort Niagara, has noted, for 3 centuries it has stood guard over the mouth of the Niagara River as a silent witness to the birth of nations, serving as a military stronghold, a bustling trading post, and a vital meeting ground for European and Native American cultures. This isn't just a birthday for a building, It's a celebration of 3 centuries of frontier history, Emerson said. From its construction by French artisans to its role in the American Revolution, the French castle remains the heart of our site. It was originally built by France in 1726 as the Maison Machicoulis, or machicolated house, for soldiers, trade, and defense. Its defensive features, overhanging dormers for firing, gave it the name machicolated house, though castle became common later. Garrisoned over the years by French, British, and American soldiers, the building was restored during the 1920s. In 2026, the French castle will be the site of several events marking its 300th anniversary. On April 25th, a history symposium will be held at the site, with national experts descending on the fort to uncover the secrets of the 18th century New York frontier. On June 6th, we'll see a maritime recreation of the arrival of French engineer Gaspard Joseph Chaussegros de Léry and his artisans and workers who built the French castle. The day will feature a high-profile rededication ceremony with dignitaries from the U.S. and France, building trade demonstrations, a grand parade of regimental flags, and military pageantry of the era. 2 celebrations collide on August 1st, as Niagara County's USA 250th celebration will be held at the fort. The event will feature a 2-day Revolutionary War encampment, special tours, live musical entertainment, and an immersive after-dark experience. Of course, you don't have to wait till spring or summer to visit Old Fort Niagara and take in a structure older than our country. It's always a worthwhile trip up to Youngstown and Fort Niagara State Park, no matter the season. We say it a lot around here. Too often we overlook what's in our own backyard. This anniversary is another reminder of how much we have to see and do in the Niagara region. If there was ever a year to take advantage, this is it. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Gazette on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Finally, we turn to the issue of the Gazette from Tuesday, January 20th, and we begin with an article on the situation with the Buffalo Bills by Mark Scheer, commentator. The Best of Times is the quintessential football movie for me. I loved it the first time I saw it. I've watched it dozens of times since. It has a lot to do with Buffalo Bills fan in me. For those who aren't familiar, the movie, released in 1986, stars the late Robin Williams and Kurt Russell. Williams plays Jack Dundee, a sad sack bank loan manager who never recovered after dropping a potential go-ahead touchdown pass in the big high school rivalry football game. The drop so deeply haunts Jack that he watches footage of his bungle over and over and over and over again on a loop. He can't get over how his high-profile miscue let down an entire community, his hometown of Taft, which always loses, often in grand fashion, to its more successful and prosperous crosstown rival, Bakersfield. Jack had a chance to change Taft's destiny that day. Instead, he blew it. His drop put an unceremonious end to an otherwise stellar high school football career for Russell's character, the greatest quarterback in the history of South Kern County, with arguably the coolest quarterback name, Reno Hightower. I won't spoil it for those of you who never saw it, but Jack gets the bright idea to convince Reno and his old teammates, who appear in the movie to be at least in their 30s, maybe even older, to replay the game. Just imagine if Andre Reed decided to round up Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Bruce Smith, Darrell Talley, and the other players from the 1990s and give one of those Super Bowl losses another try. Scriptwriter Ron Shelton, of Tin Cup and White Men Can't Jump fame, does an exceptional job crafting the characters and the dialogue for The Best of Times, the dialogue is especially sharp and often funny during the interactions between Jack and Reno. But what I think the film gets most right is its setting. You really get a sense of life in downtrodden Taft, a community started with an oil strike that quickly develops disappointment as its identity because none of its residents could figure out how to cap the dam well. While Jack obsesses about dropping the ball, the rest of the townsfolk act as if They've gotten over it, even though in many ways, subconsciously, they haven't. Reno's busted knees from injuries suffered during the big game cost him what would likely have been a successful college and maybe even pro career. He earns his adult living as a van painting specialist, a job he likes because he's good at it. The lights have been out on the outside of the movie house on Taft's Main Street for years. Bakersfield's high school football players are all still bigger and stronger, their coaches more skilled. They finally had a year when it felt like they could win it all because they finally had a quarterback who seemed like he could really win it all. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? All this season, I shared texts with pictures of Jack, the bank manager, and Reno, the quarterback, to my inner circle of Bills faithful. My dad, my nephew Ricky, and this guy who used to work here named Phil Gambini. I sent them most often when it felt like Josh Allen, our Reno, had to put on his white shoes and rescue the team from what looked like a probable loss. Once again, at least during the regular season, he found ways to get the job done. Last Saturday, it wasn't enough. The Denver Broncos bounced the Bills from the playoffs in yet another controversial and infuriating manner. Wide right, 13 seconds, and now a catch that was a catch being ruled an interception. How much can one fan base take? On Monday morning, I saw the shocking news on Facebook about the firing of longtime Bills coach Sean McDermott. At first, I thought it was fake news, a bit of clickbait. Then I saw headlines from the New York Times and the New York Post, and I knew it was real. Unfathomable to me, but real. I know opinions will vary, but count me among those who think a coaching change at this stage of the game is a bad move. McDermott taught us to trust the process. He helped the Bills finally put an end to their 17-year playoff drought. He got a lot out of what was a flawed roster this season. I always felt like the players mostly played hard for him. The Bills, except for this season, mostly ruled the AFC East under his leadership. Part of me worries our quarterback, who openly wept during the press conference following the Denver loss, may internalize this move. I'm really wondering who else team owner Terry Pegula thinks will be able to do a better job. I feel like, at least this year, it wasn't so much the coaching as it was the way the ball bounced and, yes, how the refs called the play on the field. Regardless of where things go from here, this marks the end of an era. An often thrilling and at times frustrating era, but an era just the same. Sadly, the Bills didn't win the big one. For us fans, Taft still hasn't beaten Bakersfield. I wanted so desperately for this coach, this quarterback, this team, and this fan base to get the job done together, to fully erase all those lingering demons from previous Super Bowl disappointments. But it's not a movie. We don't get any do-overs. These are not the best of times. This is a harsh reality, the real and raw emotions that often come with failure and change and uncertainty. And while I'd never really take up the offer, on a snow-covered Monday as I continue to try to cope with the lasting pain of another heart-wrenching Buffalo Bills playoff exit, a tiny part of me can't help but think about what it might be like to be anywhere other than right here, right now, for a change. Here's also a front-page story from the January 20th edition on a subject that we heard about a few issues ago, and this is the merger of some of the state parks in the area. It's called Bigger and Better. As Frederick Law Olmsted was designing what would become the Niagara Reservation, now Niagara Falls State Park, which came into existence in 1885, he had originally planned for the preserved landscape to stretch north along the Niagara Gorge. It appears that his initial vision will be fulfilled. Merging Niagara Falls State Park with nearby Whirlpool and Devil's Hole State Parks was one of the proposals in Governor Kathy Hochul's State of the State address this past week. The change would create a roughly 5-mile-long singular park along the Niagara River, with the governor's office arguing it would also better connect other attractions in its path, like the Aquarium of Niagara and the Underground Railroad Heritage Center. We want to bring more visitation and attention to these resources along the gorge, said State Parks Niagara Region Director Mark Mistretta arguing this will encourage people to stay in Niagara Falls longer to see more of the local offerings. He added that the two other parks would not lose their identity or history with the changes. Mistretta said the idea of this merger came out of talks among regional staff and at Albany, wondering why the separate state parks were needed for the Whirlpool and Devil's Hole areas. Seeing the original plans Olmsted had for the park showed the line of thinking isn't new. The Albany folks agreed. This does make sense, Mistretta said. Niagara Falls State Park, which claims to be the oldest state park in the country, is regularly the most visited park in the whole statewide system, bringing in around 9.5 million visitors in 2024. By comparison, the Whirlpool Park drew in 453,000 guests, and Devil's Hole saw 357,000 guests. Despite being connected to the larger state park through trails and not having parking fees. They have a lot to offer, having extraordinary viewer experiences, Mistretta said, but they're undervisited and not well known. The change would not be a big initial investment from the state, as updated signage and wayfinding will be phased in through at least this summer, with their digital presentation changing too. Among potential larger investments, the Niagara Scenic Trolley, which currently transports guests around Niagara Falls State Park, would require some state support for expansion. The current amenities at Whirlpool and Devil's Hole parks, like picnic areas, hiking trails, and scenic overlooks of the Niagara Gorge, will stay the same, with the free parking at the two areas remaining in place as well. Mistretta said that additional investments may come their way soon, like new playgrounds or additional overlooks of the gorge. Niagara Falls State Park had received plenty of state investments in the past few years, with the $46 million Ralph C. Wilson Welcome Center opening in December of 2023, and a state park archive space opening this past May. It is also where guests go for famous attractions like the Maid of the Mist and the Cave of the Winds. Both Whirlpool and Devil's Hole currently reside along the Niagara Scenic Parkway, which is currently in planning for its third removal phase from Findlay Drive to Lewiston Center Street. The potential options for the removal, first shared in December 2024, would take out the former southbound highway lane with a multi-purpose trail, as the current Parkway Road would be rebuilt as a conventional road. The final design report will come out this coming September, though construction is not due to start until 2030. What we're trying to do makes a stronger case to advance that project, said Mistretta, as the revamped Parkway area would remove pavement and add more green space. It would add more credibility to this overall state park umbrella. From the opinions page, guest opinion by Robert Cairns, Governor says it's time to dance. With all the pressing issues and depressing news in the world today, it's nice to see our governor taking on something truly important, dancing. Governor Kathy Hochul gave her State of the State address last week. The policy book that accompanies the address said she plans to get rid of an old state law that makes it illegal to dance in some restaurants and bars. As reported by the New York Post, the book released ahead of her Tuesday speech said she will direct the state liquor authority to create a hybrid restaurant dance license. To improve trust and transparency and cut red tape, Governor Hochul will charge SLA with allowing dancing by default in taverns and bars and creating a new hybrid restaurant tavern license, the policy book stated. Let's let that sink in for a moment. How many of us have danced in taverns and bars? Who even knew this was an issue? As the Post reported, dancing is currently forbidden under state rules for a restaurant license. A new license category would let restaurant owners offer a place to dance in addition to dining. The new hybrid license type will bring more transparency to the community, as the license will accurately reflect the character of the establishment, Hochul said. Under the current law, applicants applying for bar and tavern licenses must explicitly request dancing on the premises. Under Hochul's proposal, bars and taverns would automatically have the right to showcase dancing if the application is approved. Again, according to the Post story, applicants will continue to require community disclosure and comment periods for dancing and performance dancing. So many questions. For starters, Why was this ever an issue? The answer probably comes from the days when religion held more sway than it does now. Some are probably too young to remember so-called blue laws, which kept most businesses closed on Sundays and did what they could to limit businesses and activities that some found unsavory. There are likely some restaurateurs who would want to do that. It creates new opportunities by cutting through red tape. New York State Restaurant Association CEO Melissa Flashett told the Post. But does it really change anything? We've never come across a news release or police blotter entry that said someone was charged with illegal dancing in a restaurant. The Post story makes a couple references to the 1984 film Footloose, in which a rebellious Kevin Bacon starts a dance revolution that shakes a small town loose from the control of a preacher played by John Lithgow. Bacon and Lithgow's town had laws against dancing. Bacon found a spot just outside the town line and, sort of like the Pied Piper, led the youth of the area into a dance rebellion. They danced really well for people who had supposedly never done it before. A much larger and slightly more real town dealt with the issue almost a decade ago. In 2017, then New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio and the City Council repealed the city's so-called cabaret law, which banned dancing in some establishments. Again, according to the Post, the city law had made obtaining a permit that allows patrons to dance extremely onerous and expensive. So, bar owners, polish those floors. Dancers, lace up your shoes. The governor is on your side. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from current issues of the Niagara Gazette. We read from the Niagara Gazette every Saturday at 11 a.m. Your reader has been Diane Kasmerick. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the Dunkirk Observer. Following that at 1 o'clock, we have a reading of some of our Northtown Bee papers, including Amherst, Clarence, Cheektowaga, Lancaster, and Depew. And then at 2 o'clock, we have the Southtown Bees, which includes Orchard Park, the Hamburg Sun, the East Aurora, and West Seneca papers. Stay with us for these readings and more. You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Radio Reading broadcasts daily readings 24 hours a day of newspapers, magazines, and books to people who are blind or have a print disability and are provided reading radios. Radio Reading's broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. From broadcast studios at 1199 Harlem Road, Radio Reading continues our almost 40-year tradition of award-winning service. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call 716-821-5555. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,